You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hello, I'm Stephen Willis from the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. He is Michael Katz from the Northeast Mississippi Tupelo Daily Journal newspaper. He covers Ole Miss football. He does a heck of a job. You should all check his stuff out on the website. And heck, get a subscription to the newspaper. Be 90s. Be nostalgic and get that subscription. Anyway, how you doing, Michael?
It's been a very long couple days. The drive to Gainesville is not for the faint of heart.
Did I tell you that drive from Pensacola to Tallahassee was the worst in the world?
Well, it took me two different ways. The first way, I went through Alabama. And the second, and then on the way back, I went through like Warner Robins in Georgia. And let me tell you, both weren't great.
No, it is not a fun drive from Florida to Mississippi. There's just no real easy way to get there. And the sad thing about it is most Mississippians have made that drive because of Disney World.
Yep. Yeah.
So anyway, we are regrouping from that Florida drive back in the whole 9 yards for an Egg Bowl clash on Friday. That's tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. Central Time. Ole Miss has to regroup in this game. It was one of those situations earlier in the week. I was like, Lane had to keep everybody together and keep everybody bought in for 6 days. That was the test.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that the good, if there's any silver lining to the game being a little earlier, it's that you have no time to kind of lick your wounds and think about how bad everything is and your chances and all that stuff. You immediately have to go to game planning and game prep. So I do think there's an advantage there. I also think that, I mean, let me tell you, like right after the game, that was like the most dejected post-game press conference I've probably ever been at. And, you know, I'm not surprised. I mean, if they thought it was over, right? The 3 losses, that's it. There's no chance. And then like a very weird college football weekend happened, and like it sort of opened up the door possibilities of a 3-loss team getting in. And I don't know, at least yesterday it seemed like there was still like a glimmer of hope. And I think like, listen, you don't need motivation for the Egg Bowl. It's the Egg Bowl. Like you should be able to get jacked up for that regardless. But I think like they understand that, one, you want to end the season, the regular season, your last home game if you're one of the seniors, on a good note. But two, you know, it's not in your hands anymore. But if you take care of business and some more weird things happen, this has been a very, very weird college football season. You know, maybe, you know, the cards fall your way, and again, you can't control it, but you can blow out state and give a good lasting image to the committee. So I do think that probably helped too, that little glimmer that there's still a chance.
Yeah, and just so everybody knows that's watching this video, it's recorded on a Tuesday before the ranking show. It normally gets recorded on a Thursday, but because of the holidays, everything had to get pushed up a little bit. So if everybody's wondering while we're talking about stuff that may or may not be happening, that is the reason why. We'll see what happens there, because I think Ari Wasserman on Tuesday put out a tweet of what he thought the rankings would be. And I'm going off that, but it was Clemson at Ole Miss at 13, or Ole Miss at 14, Clemson at 13, Alabama at 12. And that happens. And the path for Ole Miss, I honestly believe this. Ole Miss needs to put a 50 burger on Mississippi State Saturday night. There's no way around that. There is no path forward without blowing out that game, because Ole Miss needs South Carolina to beat Clemson, but not jump Ole Miss. Alabama needs to lose to Auburn. Tennessee probably needs to lose to Vanderbilt. Hey, throw it in there. The Georgia Bulldogs should probably lose to Georgia Tech. Anybody that has a number next to their name, Michael, Ole Miss fans should probably be rooting against that team this weekend if Ole Miss puts the 50 burger on Mississippi State.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of caveats with them making a move. But again, you know, I just think back to like, God, what year was it? 2007, when like 2-loss LSU like made it to the BCS national championship game because USC blew it in their last game of the season against UCLA. They would have gotten a national title game, and then it just created this whole chaos at the end of the year. We've seen weird things happen. It could happen, but again, like you said, I think Ole Miss needs a really, really convincing win to show the committee like, hey, like this is who we are, not the team that kind of disappears in some really important moments this year. I think like
about once a month they just disappear.
Yeah, and again, like they look like the best team in the country 2.5 weeks ago, and then the Gainesville game happens, and it's inconsistency. It's the SEC being weird, but I think the more that you can show the committee that, hey, we're a lot closer to the team that beat Georgia than we are to the team that lost by 3 games by a combined 13 points.
What is your take on the whole Ulysses Bentley saga?
Buddy, if I knew, I wouldn't be doing this for a living. I would be I'd be a fortune teller or a psychic or I don't know, man. It's when Micah Davis is lining up at running back, I thought for the first couple plays it was like a gimmick. I thought it was like, oh yeah, they're gonna put him in motion and send him out for passes, and then I see him running up the middle, and I was like, oh, okay, we're doing this, are we? It's again, Ole Miss always plays everything pretty close to the vest in terms of what is going on. To Bentley's credit, he has handled it well. We've talked to him this year, and he has just been a pro. I think the weirdest thing is that you figure like if it was like a significant health thing, he wouldn't be on kickoff returns, but he's on kickoff returns, and so there's a lot going on. They could really use a healthy running back right now. They're really missing Henry Parrish right now for sure. It's going to be interesting to see because this is a very, very bad run defense from State. Among the worst. If you can't manufacture yards on the ground against them, that's not a good look. So you would like to think that if it's Micah Davis, if it's Dominic Thomas, if it's Bentley, like whoever it is, it should be it shouldn't be Jackson Dart getting the majority of your yards off scrambles. I would have to think.
Yeah, and let's say that Ole Miss comes out and wins a 38-17 type game. Probably not good enough to go to the playoffs, but a convincing win. At what point should Ole Miss go ahead and turn the page to next season and Austin Simmons and Aiden Williams and those guys to see what you have for the bowl game? Because that bowl game is going to be weird.
Yeah, that's the question. I think that I think they will probably hold out hope until December 8th. I think that's the day the selection show is. And then all the bowls come out. And I think right after that, we're going to hear who's playing, who's not playing. Because, you would have to imagine that if it's not a playoff game, there's going to be people who opt out because of their professional futures. And that's just kind of the trend these days. I think what makes the bowl game hypothetically interesting is like you could get a glimpse at 2025 and 2026, depending on who decides to come back or who decides not to play in the game. So for me, if I had to imagine, I think they're going to probably, again, assuming it's a convincing Egg Bowl win, and depending what happens, Saturday in rivalry weekend. I think they would probably hold out hope until December 8th, and then after that, I think you're gonna probably learn pretty fast what that bowl roster is gonna look like.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. When we come back, we will talk about Michael's view of the Egg Bowl as somebody from Southern California, an outsider's perspective on the game, and we'll start to do a little autopsy on the season and all that and figure out what's going on. So stick around for that. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. Ole Miss is a 26.5-point favorite over the Mississippi State Bulldogs in the Egg Bowl. I am personally worried about how this team is going to react after that Florida game. We'll see how it goes. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place your live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch, in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com today to join. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel. It's an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So, Michael, coming from Southern California, I mean, obviously USC, UCLA is kind of a thing in your neck of the woods. Stanford Cal's a thing. Heck, USC and UCLA Cal's a thing. All those California schools going back and forth. But what was it like for an outsider coming in and being immersed in this Egg Bowl environment?
So I think like again, like you said, USC, UCLA, USC Notre Dame was a really big one for me too, growing up. But like there's a lot more, I don't know if vitriol is the correct term, but like there is a lot of emotional tension between these fan bases, and I don't know if hate is the right word, but like there are some very strong feelings about this game, regardless of how each respective team season is going. It really doesn't matter if someone is having a perfect season or is 2-9 or 2-10, whatever it is. It's really intense, and I think that was one of the biggest things I learned, at least in like coming to the SEC and seeing Southern rivalries, is that there's just so much emotion behind a lot of them. You look at the Iron Bowl, you look at Florida, Georgia, all of these sorts of games. But I think the Egg Bowl particularly too, because Mississippi, I guess in the grand scheme of SEC states, is a little on the smaller side. And you think about I know Southern Miss is in there, and there's Jackson State, and there's a lot of universities in Mississippi. But when you think about the state, you think of Mississippi, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State. It's those two, and those are they're always fighting for each other's attention, for the state's attention, and for the recruits, and to be the darling of the state in the media world. So there is a certain amount of there's an emotion that I think that, and maybe it's just because I grew up in California, like we don't have emotion when it comes to college sports for the most part. It's like, if SC is not good, like people aren't going to games. That's just like how it goes. If Mississippi State and Ole Miss aren't good, there's still going to be a packed Egg Bowl. This weekend, USC plays Notre Dame and SC. It's probably going to be mostly Notre Dame fans. Like that's just how this is going to work, even though it's in Southern California. So I think the emotion and just it just seems like there's more at stake in the Egg Bowl, just from a pride standpoint than any of the rivalries that I grew up in, at least.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like my second Egg Bowl, was in 1983. It was the Immaculate Deflection game. So I actually got to see that. I can vividly recount exactly how it went from sitting in the stadium. It was that moment for a 7-year-old kid at that point, sitting there watching the game on his dad's shoulders in the stands, but I can remember everything. I took everything in. I didn't even know what I was doing at that point. But I always like to joke, because like my college football fandom peaked early. But it's an interesting game. The game in Jackson, I think the game in Jackson was fun. The half and half game and all of that, to where it's set up. I think Ole Miss and State got it back to campus, which is great. It's all, I'm not saying it's not, but there is a specialness that happened about this Egg Bowl game being played in Jackson.
Yeah, no, I've thought about that. It seems like it would be really cool to kind of meet them halfway. But again, there is something special though about rivalry games at home field.
Yes, absolutely.
So I can definitely see it both ways.
Yeah, and there's been some really, really good moments. Like in 2014, it's the 10-year anniversary of it. A game in Oxford that Mississippi State was bound for the college football playoff that they just got trucked by Ole Miss that game. You have a game like the Stand in 1992 where Mississippi State had 10 plays inside the 10-yard line in the closing minutes to win the game. There's moments all over the place. On the other side, you have like the Eli kick interception and many happy returns by Derek Pegues. This is just such a cool game. And I think it's fun when outsiders get to experience it, because everybody thinks about the Iron Bowl. Everybody thinks about Oklahoma, Texas, all of these other games. none of those games are probably the best rivalry in the SEC. I think the Egg Bowl is probably the best pure rivalry on the field. No stakes or anything. And the way the two fan bases treat it, it's probably the supreme leader in the Southeastern Conference.
And I think that's one of the interesting things when you talk to players who are from different states. Like Trey Washington, we talked to yesterday. He's from Alabama. He grew up in the Iron Bowl. And I think it catches even players off guard when they get here, just how intense this rivalry is. And again, like when I got here, I knew the Egg Bowl for the Elijah Moore stuff, because those are my last memories of it, right? But it's and it always does seem to be a weird game. There's usually something strange that happens, but I think that thinking about it as just sort of a meme is not doing it justice. Like, this is a great football game between two really proud fan bases that want nothing more than to ruin the other team's season. And I think that until you've seen it in person, you've been in the stands, or you've been in the press box, or you're part of a fan base on either side, I really do think it's hard to understand just how much it means to people.
Should be a lot of fun. Hey, Michael Katz, he's heading over to Oxford tomorrow to cover the game, 2:30, ABC 24 in Memphis. If you're in that area, check them out. Michael, what do you got going on this week, bud?
Well, it's a lot of fortune telling in terms of what the CFP future holds. So a lot of analysis on that, and looking at the percentages and watching. I know it's such a hard job. I'm going to be watching rivalry weekend very closely. I'm very brave for doing that. Just keeping tabs on what's going on. But yeah, I'm going to have an analysis piece. It will have already come out, I guess, by the time this runs. Have some Egg Bowl coverage, obviously, some post Egg Bowl coverage, and then it's going to be a waiting game for a lot of us, and I think that's an exciting time. It's a nerve-wracking time, I imagine, for fans, but I'm going to hopefully do some work that'll take your mind off some stuff.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Michael Katz from the Northeast Mississippi Tupelo Daily Journal. It is Egg Bowl week. Michael, be careful heading over to the game, and I look forward to your content, bud.
Thanks, buddy.